This is Hannibal here from thehannibaltv.com with a daily wrestling news update. The big talk right now is Mark Henry, who was recently released from AEW after basically collecting a paycheck and doing little to nothing for 3 years. He has made some comments about AEW saying that the top guys basically are protective of their positions, which might explain why they didn't want to put Mark Henry, for instance, managing another guy that could possibly have got over as a top guy, or why they never used Ric Flair to manage anyone. Or why actually one of the biggest problems with AEW right now is they don't have any megastars. They don't have anyone that's like Austin or The Rock, to a lesser extent CM Punk and Roman Reigns. They got no real household names right now. Jericho was more. I don't think he was ever like a Madison Square Garden sellout guy. He was always a good star, but he's not like, he's past his prime at this point, but he's at least making a lot of money. Anyways, Mark Henry got in some trouble for talking about the Janelle Grant situation, saying, quote, people were like, you're being insensitive and there's other people that suffered. He goes on to say, I said, yeah, but you know, some of those people that y'all talking about suffering, their suffering got worse when the money ran out. Like, where was the suffering when they were getting BNWs and $1 million? Did that pacify the suffering? Because if you are suffering, you should suffer all the time, right? Nothing should get in your way of that. I don't know. I just come from a different time. Who knows if he's talking about Janelle Grant there or others, but I think one of the reasons why a lot of people have lost interest in the Janelle Grant lawsuit is when it's come out all that she did get, and that she was actually engaged or something at the whole time living with a guy just a few floors below Vince McMahon. So it takes away some of the sympathy of the whole allegations, which frankly I'm sick of hearing about it. And the major networks aren't even covering it anymore. It's pretty much the wrestling news sites. I'm sure if and when it actually goes to court, people might get more interested again, but now it's just like, oh, it's a slow news day. Mark Henry said something about it. Let's talk about it. He's entitled to his opinion. And again, I don't have anything against Mark Henry, but I just find it funny. When I was working for SWE Fury, and I was the guy running their YouTube channel, which I got it from like 400 and something to over 20,000. And I was in charge of doing interviews. And Mark Henry was getting a paycheck from them for doing very little, pretty much just doing autographs at the shows. And they told me to get an interview with him. And I asked him for an interview. And he said, what's that going to do for me? I'm like, well, you're working for this company. Don't you want to help promote it? I don't know. I thought that was kind of rude. But at the same time, he said he liked my match that night. But I mean, some people are weird about interviews. Anyways, in other news, CM Punk appeared at some type of convention this weekend and was asked about would he be interested in wrestling Steve Austin, who had an unadvertised match a few years ago at WrestleMania. Was it unadvertised to prevent potential negative publicity that may have forced canceling the match? Who knows? But Steve Austin has said he would like to potentially wrestle at next year's WrestleMania, since it is in Las Vegas and he lives in Nevada. And CM Punk says the match should have happened 10 years ago, but he'd be interested in wrestling Steve Austin if it happens. According to Dave Meltzer, a lot of people thought the bracelet angle with CM Punk and Drew McIntyre having some doing some angle over one of those 10-cent bracelets or whatever. I cared so little about that. I don't even know about it other than Triple H mentioned how over it was in the post SummerSlam press conference. I also, again, I listened to Wrestling Observer Radio today. Meltzer made a point that there seems to be a new theme in wrestling that when people are on their way out, they don't get beat by companies on their way out anymore. For instance, Andrade, before he went to WWE, he was actually winning matches in AEW. Ricky Starks, who is supposedly leaving AEW for WWE, they're just not putting him on TV rather than trying to get people that are less over than him over by having them beat them, for instance. And it goes the same way with Bobby. Bobby Lashley put in his time, and he's a guy that deserves respect. So I can understand why he wasn't beaten on his way out of WWE. But apparently, him and MVP are on the alumni section of WWE now. So they're definitely gone. Apparently, he wasn't one of Triple H's favorites. But the other thing that Meltzer talked about is this hologram guy that Tony Khan really wanted to get over. Apparently, people don't like his mask, which you can see here. It's kind of cheesy. And again, he's got about your average build of an AEW guy. I mean, they do have some big guys, but it seems they love pushing guys like this. Guys that look about 5'7", 5'8", 160 pounds. Crappy looking mask. And Meltzer points out that if he had like a mask that people would actually want to buy, maybe the gimmick would have got over more. But yeah, they need someone to get really over to make that company popular again. I would dare to say, and I got no problem with the Young Bucks. I respect them if they're making $6 million a year to wrestle like 30-ish times a year or appear 30 times a year. Good for them. But is it just me? You guys tell me in the comments. They've got less over since the beginning of AEW. I don't feel they're as hot as they were when AEW was created. That's just me. I don't think like I remember before AEW existed, they would do independent shows and the indie shows would be packed because the Young Bucks were there. Now AEW is having a hard time getting 1,000 people for some shows.